Well, over the past few weeks, we've been going through the step-by-step process of how to build stagecoach wheels for this Yellowstone Park stagecoach that I'm working on. And we've gone through the process of turning the hubs, mortising out for the spokes. Even if you have to, how can you make your spokes, even if it has to be by hand? We've gone through the process of steam bending the outside wood rims, commonly called the fellies. And today we're going to get into maybe the last two steps of installing these fellies onto the spokes and maybe even rolling the tires and get them set on. So when I bent these fellies, I sawed them at 2 inches wide and 2 1/4 inches deep. But the tire on this is going to be 1/2 inch thick by 2 inches wide, but I want that wood to be just a bit smaller than the iron so that the iron acts as a deflector on road debris, rocks, that type of stuff to keep the abrasion off of the fellies. So I've got them planed down to 1 7/8 right now. And when I do the tire setting and I do my final sanding, I may be closer to 1 3/4. Anywhere close to 1/8 of an inch overhang on both sides is acceptable. I may be just a hair under that, but it'll work. When you're working with fellies that are more in the buggy-like carriage era, then you're going to have one edge that is square, but the back side actually has a taper to it as the spoke comes in, and this is the dish this direction. On these stagecoach wheels, however, they are going to be square all the way through. They don't have the same taper that a buggy or a carriage felly has. Even farm wagons and chuck wagons and sheep wagons all have this same style of a tapered felloe as well. So this face is actually goes straight across for the dish on the other side. This side actually coordinates with the back side of the spoke and the dish of the wheel. And why that is not so in a stagecoach, I couldn't really tell you, I guess. But this is going to be the straight face of the dish face, but the spokes still will come in at an angle here. But this is why we have a taper on the spokes, or a change in the angle, just the same as we do on a buggy wheel or a farm wagon wheel. That same change in the angle of the tenon has to occur. But on a stagecoach, the backside seems to be square. So that's what we're going to do on this one. I'm not sure if you can see it too well with this camera. This is the original stagecoach wheel from Yellowstone Park, and the front is straight, and the backside also seems to be straight. But this is that little bit of an overhang from the iron to the felly that I was talking about. And it's that way on both sides. You can see this tire is not all that thick. We're probably 3/8 of an inch thickness now, but I'm assuming there was probably quite a little bit of wear and tear with all the miles. I would guess it probably started out at 1/2 inch. That's where I'm going to go. So when we're putting on our fellies, we need to know what the spacing is on the spokes. We would like to have this kind of symmetrical. So we need to go to the inside diameter of the fellies. Outside of this wheel, we're going to be 53 without the tire. So we need 2 1/4 inches off of the thickness of these fellies times 2. So we're going to come in from that 53, 4 1/2 inches, and then divide that by pi. And since we have 14 spokes, we'll take that number and divide it by 14, and that'll give us a symmetrical spacing on all the spokes. So 53 minus 4.5, 48 1/2 times pi, 3.14. And then we're going to divide that by 14, 10.88. Well, 0.875 is 7/8, so that's where we're going to be at is 10 7/8 of an inch between our spokes. So remember, I cut these fellies 1 foot long, so I found the center, and I will actually just cut off the ends. This should be spoke number 6. That will be spoke number 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I'll lay them up against my wheel just to double check that my spacings are close. They're not going to be exact because there may be little variations here. By the time I work this around, we're right on the mark. So this is my cutoff mark. I want a straight line from between those spokes at the hub out at my felly. That's going to be the angle of my cut. I'll do that on both sides. So when we started cutting the tenons on these spokes, I just took that spoke cone and just centered it on the end of that spoke. And so this portion here is the center of this spoke as it came out. But because this tenon has an angle to it, the further we come in, the closer it gets to the top of the spoke, because this spoke is falling away because of the angle coming out of the hub. So we see we have a narrower space here than we do here. So here we are centered, but at the shoulder we're not. And this is where we're going to drill the hole on the fellies at the shoulder here. So if I just drilled that hole center into the felly, then the spoke actually is going to look like it is offset. So I need to offset this in the felly to where this spoke will look like it is centered up in the felly, but it'll actually be a little offset when it comes out to the face of the tire. So if you have a spoke that is this type of an angle, and you center it up with a cone, and you have the point of this cone centered into that spoke, but when you start to drill this tenon straight with the face of the dish, the further you come down this spoke, the closer and closer it gets to the front of that spoke, and your shoulder ends up looking like this. So when you have a felloe that is square in the front and tapered in the back. In order for this spoke here to be centered, this tenon hole needs to be moved forward because we have very little space on the front, but we have a lot of space in the back. So we have a hole that has to be positioned like so, and the spoke is going to look like so. It's going to look centered on the face, and actually will be centered on the face of that felloe, but as this mortise or this hole is cut for this tenon, it's actually, the goal of it is to come out centered here on the face of the tire. So that's going to be one thing that will be different on these Stagecoach wheels with a square felloe. We're actually going to center that spoke in the face of that felloe, but the tenon of the spoke is going to be a little bit offset. So at the face of the tire, we're going to be a little closer to the front and a little wider on the backside. So this face is 1 7/8, and I know I'm driving all you folks nuts that are used to metric, but these coaches were built not on metric. So 1/2 7/8 is 15/16, and I want to move this forward 1/16 of an inch. So from the back side forward, I'm going to cut this right at 1 inch. That puts this tenon hole just 1/16 of an inch forward, but it'll actually center the spoke on the ID face of this belly. So I have this little saddle clamped to the table of my drill press, and that will automatically put this arc in a level position where I can drill my spoke holes. So I guess now we get to see if they fit. This is big enough that sometimes I can do these without any assistance with the spreader. So oftentimes on the ends and sometimes through the middle of the fellies as well, it'll have a little difficulty keeping the fellow up against the shoulder. So I'll just take and drive a wedge, something like so, into the end of the tenon. And I'll start a little spot there with a chisel and then insert my wedge vertically. You don't want to go horizontally because then you could add pressure this way and split that felly. So you want to go vertically. Well, most of the time you can buy these commercially made in either a 3/8 width or a 1/2 inch width. But I have a 3/4 inch tenon here. So I make my own wedges. So this little kerf opening on my chop saw is way too wide when I make spoke wedges. So I put kind of a facade fence on there that I can actually saw through and make the kerf just the same width as my blade. And I'm going to offset my table by 5 degrees. And make a cut there. So this is a piece of hard maple left over from when I did that manure spreader. So my very first cut is kind of a waste. Then I want my cut to come out right at that point. So I have a nice sharp point to start that wedge. I'm going to mark where that's going to be, and I just make wedges. It'll tighten that right up. So I may have pointed this out on previous videos, but I'll just bring it up again. I have my first 4 spokes started, but by the time I want to start the 5th spoke, I want this shoulder almost touching, if not completely touching. When that comes down that close, then I'm ready to start my 5th spoke. So this is now where the final sizing comes into play. I am touching at the joint of my fellies, but you can see I have a little space where the fellies have not come up against the shoulders of the spokes. And this is the process of doing the final sizing. So if we had built these wheels completely flat, there would be a circumference that would correlate with the length of the spokes as the spokes lay flat. But as the spokes come up into a dish, the circumference of that outer rim, in this case the fellies, has to become progressively smaller. And so that is the process of sizing, is taking and adjusting the circumference, and I do that with a handsaw, taking cuts at the two joints until this circumference becomes the right length to come down to where all of these spoke shoulders tighten up and all the joints in the hub tighten up. So what we're doing is we're accomplishing 14 joints here, 14 joints here, which is 28, and then 2 more joints in the fellies. We're trying to get 30 joints to come together all at the same time. And all that has to happen when the pressure of the tire comes in and brings all this together. So this is the process of doing the assembly of the fellies. The next step in sizing is actually coordinated with sizing of the tire. And it looks like we're going to get that next week. I just ran out of time. Appreciate you coming along. Thanks for watching.